Welcome to the IshbelWELL Deep Dive Workshop Series, where we dig into complex gut and hormonal conditions through the lens of curated nutrition protocols that draw on the latest science. I'll share client stories on how gut, hormone, blood chemistry, and genetics testing can revolutionize your understanding of a quote-unquote healthy diet. You can heal your body's unique symptoms and in turn up-level your life. The first step on that journey is education. So let's dig in to today's topic. Well, welcome to my live show. Thanks for joining me. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about the most important part of your gut healing journey. So if you struggle with fatigue, infertility, weight gain is a really big one. If you're a woman who has PCOS, perimenopause, menopause, or if you're a woman who just really, really struggles with your cycle, have incredibly severe PMS, it doesn't have to be that way. And one of the biggest issues that I see in my practice is that we're never actually establishing the fundamentals, the foundations for hormonal health, and that resides in your gut. I also have a lot of men in my practice, especially men in their mid to late 40s, struggle a lot with hormonal issues. We don't really talk about that very much in our society. I really wish that we did because it's such an important topic. But men struggle a lot of times with weight gain, especially around their middle, that they just can't lose no matter what they do. We're going to be talking about that tonight, about how much fat, especially fat around your middle, can contribute to hormonal imbalances. It's really quite fascinating. Probably about 75% of the men that I work with in my practice have low testosterone. And concurrently, they also have been diagnosed with prediabetes or diabetes. So there's a really strong correlation between gut health, hormones, and blood sugar balance. And we're going to be talking about this from a number of different perspectives and how this presents in both men and women. So I want to start with a little story about me. I was diagnosed with PCOS when I was 28 years old, and I had had issues with my hormones for about 10 years prior to that, longer than that. It really started when I was 16. And I had a heck of a time getting diagnosed with PCOS, which is a very common thing that you will hear from women, especially women who are still getting their periods, or at least are still considered to be kind of in that fertility range. Frequently, their symptoms, their hormonal symptoms, are very difficult for practitioners to really help them through. So most women will be told that they need to be put on birth control. That's oftentimes kind of the classic response. Unfortunately, in my case, and in the case of a lot of women who experience these kinds of severe hormonal imbalances, birth control oftentimes doesn't improve the symptoms very much. Sometimes it makes the symptoms a lot worse, which was the case with me. And then most importantly is that the birth control doesn't actually address the core reason for why hormones are so imbalanced and where those symptoms are really coming from. So when I was really struggling with PCOS, I was having a terrible time losing weight. I had skin issues. I was told I would never have a baby unless I did IVF, and even then it would be a long shot. I was incredibly fatigued. I would say that was probably my biggest symptom. And what I thought was completely disparate from that was tremendous gut issues. So I always struggled with constipation, bloating, had severe reactions to certain foods. My diet ended up being really limited because I was just really struggling to digest what I was eating. So flash forward to now, and I technically no longer have PCOS. So PCOS is diagnosed by cysts around the ovaries and then also high testosterone levels. So what did I do over the course of the last 15 years since I was diagnosed? So the first thing that I did was I went to school, because I was finding that I did not have the resources to understand what was going on with me. I went to so many different practitioners and I would get, little bits and pieces from different people, but nothing was like a game changer. Nothing was really moving my health forward. I would maybe take like one or two steps forward and several steps back. And I wanted more for my life. I wanted to have a child. I wanted to have enough energy every day to do the things that I was dreaming of. And at that point in my life, I didn't have that. So I became a nutritional therapist, and then I went on to do advanced training on all sorts of different labs that you can run in order to not just chase the symptoms, but really identify where the imbalances are. If any of you have ever tried to chase your symptoms, gosh, I wonder if my PMS is coming from I ate a bagel last week. I know that sounds crazy, but a lot of people end up doing that for really good reasons. They're just trying to grasp onto something that could be the driver of why they feel so terrible. And so I knew that learning about these functional tests was going to be so important. So what I mean by functional tests is that there's a test called the GI map, which is arguably the gold standard of gut health testing on the market today. So it uses DNA actually in order to determine what is going on in your gut microbiome. So that was the test that I ran for myself. And then I also did a food sensitivity test. And what was revealed was that I had several different strains of dysbiotic bacteria, which were causing inflammation in my system. But I also had Candida, which Candida is a whole roller coaster in and of itself. It can cause tremendous fatigue. And it can also really mess up your blood sugar, which was always happening with me. So here's this amazing thing that happened. I had not been getting my period regularly for about 10 years. And every practitioner that I saw was like, you don't really need to have your period every month, do you? Actually, you really do. And that is why women who have PCOS are at a 50% increased risk of uterine cancer, for example. So I had a problem with the fact that I wasn't getting my period every month. And I also had a problem with the fact that I was having such severe PMS when I did get my period. Within the first month of me following the gut healing program that I now take every single one of my clients through, I started getting my period again every single month, and I have since then. Now, I've also done a lot of additional advanced work on my hormones and tested my hormones and continue to support my hormones through things like that. But really where it started with gut health, which completely shocks people that was such a massive turning point for me. And, what a lot of people will say, well, I don't have any gut issues. And frequently, there's nothing going on there, right? We run a GI map and really their gut microbiome looks really good. There's nothing severely going on, in which case we move on to hormone testing and hormone work. But I'll tell you that more often than not, people who are struggling with severe hormonal symptoms are simultaneously struggling with pretty severe digestive issues as well. However, those digestive issues are oftentimes not expressing in the way that you would expect. So in tonight's workshop, what we're going to be talking about is this relationship between your gut and your hormones. And this is a topic that is so incredibly well researched. I mean, the number of studies that I have in my notes here and that I will provide for you, for those of you who are on my newsletter, you'll be able to go in and read every single one of these studies. The research is overwhelming. However, people just don't know this. Okay, this is not kind of part of our society yet. This is not part of our conversation when we're talking about hormones, and it really, really needs to be. And so here's why. So I want to tell you the story about a client of mine who, when he first came to see me, he was 48 years old. He and his wife had just had a baby. He was feeling incredibly exhausted. They had had a pretty difficult time getting pregnant. He, around about 10 years prior to this, had started gaining weight, quite a significant amount of weight in his abdomen. He had a very sedentary job, like so many people do. He ate what I'll call a sad diet, and I did not come up with that phrase. It's the standard American diet. Okay, so lots of processed carbohydrates, lots of pasta, crackers, cereal, etc. And that weight just kind of continually came on. And as he was gaining weight, he was simultaneously noticing that his mood was really suffering. He didn't feel as motivated as he used to. His libido had dropped, his energy had dropped, and he just didn't feel like himself anymore. And as much as we as a society are shifting towards talking about menopause and perimenopause, as we should be, okay, women need an incredible amount of support during that transition, and they have not gotten it until very recently. And I'll also say that men actually really need support as well as they transition into andropause. So a lot of people don't even know that andropause is a thing. Andropause is a thing. So it's like the man's version of menopause. Testosterone levels start to lower. And in addition to some of these symptoms that I already talked about, fatigue, weight gain, lethargy, lack of motivation, a lot of times this is accompanied as well by erectile dysfunction or some kind of sexual dysfunction because those testosterone levels are starting to dip. Now, with this client, you would think, right, that we would just go straight for testosterone, test his hormones, get his testosterone levels up, and call it a day. It seems pretty straightforward, right? We already know that he has low testosterone levels. That is not what we did first, and here's why. Low testosterone almost always coincides with inflammation and blood sugar issues. What does that have to do with gut health? Everything. And we're going to talk about that tonight. And be, again, referencing a lot of different research that explains this in much more detail. So when I ran this GI map test on him, something came back that I was expecting. Okay. There's a marker on the GI map called beta-glucuronidase, and I'm going to span out for a moment to give you a little bit more background on this. So there's an aspect of the gut microbiome that has been referred to now as the strobolome. So essentially what this aspect of the gut does is helps to regulate, detoxify estrogen. And you're probably thinking, well, we're talking about a guy here. Why are we talking about estrogen? Exactly. Okay. So what can happen when this beta-glucuronidase marker is high, okay, which it frequently is for people who are eating a SAD diet, that standard American diet, and are struggling with inflammation and blood sugar issues. Okay. Beta-glucuronidase number is high. Who cares? What tell me? What it tells me is that this man's body is not detoxifying estrogen appropriately. Again, who cares? Because estrogen competes with testosterone. Okay. And even more importantly, something called aromatization is when somebody has a lot of fat, especially around their abdomen, what ends up happening in that scenario is that testosterone gets converted into estrogen. Okay. Now, this is a guy who cannot lose any more testosterone. He's already low, right? But he also has weight around his middle, and he also has high beta glucuronidase markers. So what is that telling us? It's telling us that his gut microbiome is not detoxifying the estrogen that he has. So there's a buildup of estrogen in his system. And then also we have this other factor of weight gain around his middle, which is creating a scenario in which the testosterone that he does have is getting converted into estrogen. So it's kind of like a double whammy. So our goal is to address that fundamental, foundational aspect of hormone balance, which actually happens in his gut, and clear that up. Then after that, we can see about upping his testosterone levels. So what happened? Completely changed his diet, which, I will not sugarcoat for anyone. No pun intended. We got to cut the sugar out, guys. Got to stop eating that sugar. Stop eating food out of a box, please. Okay, stop it. You will feel so much better. You will start to get your life back. Okay, start eating some vegetables. Eat things out of the ground. Okay, but not like my dog. My dog likes to eat things out of the ground. I would not recommend that. The things that she brings into the house, disgusting. Okay, we're talking about vegetables, fruit, meat, animal protein is really, really important. Okay. Fiber. Fiber is where it's at, my friends. Okay. So brown rice versus white rice. That is like such a massive change. Okay. If you're one of those people who eats a lot of white rice, I work with these people. I see it all the time. White rice. I mean, white rice is delicious. Of course it is. Okay. But if you can switch out the majority of that white rice for brown rice, that in and of itself will make a huge difference in your blood sugar. It'll make a huge difference in your weight loss journey. It will help your gut so much because it has so much fiber in it. Okay. I could go on. So those are sort of like the baseline changes that you really need to be making. Okay. All right. So what happened with this guy? We did a full makeover on his diet. We did the GI map, figured out this beta glucuronidase marker was high. Not all markers on the GI map are super easy to fix, but the beta glucuronidase marker is incredibly responsive to supplementation. So we were able to get those beta glucuronidase numbers back into normal range within 3 months. So cool. He also had candida, like I did. So part of the reason that he was so driven to eat sugar constantly was because actually those microbes in his gut were calling for that. Okay, isn't that crazy that these microbes in your gut can actually be controlling what you crave? It's a real thing. So we worked on eradicating that candida as well. So what happened? He lost 20 pounds, okay, in a pretty short period of time, which just got easier for him because he had so much more energy. If you have ever been in that position where you are just so exhausted all the time, it's really difficult to comprehend working out. And so here's where we can actually reverse engineer this. Improve the diet, improve the gut microbiome, and that energy naturally comes. And then the desire to actually move more and exercise more naturally comes as well, which is what happened with him. Upon retest of his GI map, his beta glucuronidase markers were in normal range. And then we went on to test his testosterone, which was actually higher than it had been when we first started. Now, it was still in a place where he needed a little extra help. So we went on and boosted his testosterone from there. But had we not laid the foundation for his overall health, and we had just kind of skipped over that and given him just straight up testosterone, his energy would never have come up the way that it did with those dietary changes and that gut rehabilitation that we did. I see this all the time. my male clients think like, I'm just going to take testosterone and the world is going to be a better, brighter place. And my energy is going to go through the roof. My sex drive is going to go through the roof. It's just going to be roses and daisies all day long. For most men, it does not work that way because there's so many other issues that we really need to resolve. Okay? So yes, it's an important part of the process, but it is not the whole shebang. Okay, so those are two little intros for you. My story with PCOS. And those of you who don't know me, I have a daughter who is 6 years old. I was able to conceive her naturally. She is a beautiful, healthy girl. I still have my health issues. Still got to work on that gut. But I am worlds away from where I was when I started on this journey. And I like to share that, things are not perfect for me. I think that's really important. Okay. It's unfortunately not the way that the body works. Okay. It's not like we put our time in and do our hard work for 3 months and then everything just stays that way forever. Okay. It doesn't work that way. But knowing how to take care of yourself for the long term and understanding how to support yourself is so, so, so important. And that's what I strive to teach all of my clients. Okay, so let's span out and talk about briefly some of the research on the gut hormone connection. And again, if you're on my newsletter, you're going to get this research directly in the event that you want to read all these research papers. But I'm going to go through them briefly for you so that you can hear what the research is looking at in terms of the relationship with gut and hormones. And then we're going to talk about the 6 foundational pieces of hormone health. Again, these are the things, it's like a checklist that I check off when I'm working with somebody who's got hormone imbalances. We do all 6 of these things. And then we actually move into the actual testing of hormones and the specifically addressing certain hormones, okay, with certain supports. Okay. All right, so here is the list of research that I am running off tonight. So we have a study on endometriosis and gut health, estrogen dominance, which is what we've actually already talked about a lot tonight. So it's this estrogen dominance is where the body is producing too much estrogen and it is not properly balanced by, oftentimes it's not properly balanced by progesterone. And especially in men, it's not properly balanced by testosterone. Sex hormones and gut health. The gut microbiota is a major regulator of androgen metabolism and intestinal contents. Say that 10 times fast. What in the heck does that mean? It means that gut health is related to testosterone, which are androgens. PCOS and gut health. Of course, that's what I have. Low testosterone and opportunistic bacteria. I love this one, right? So we talked about this tonight. Low testosterone levels. What does that have to do with an imbalanced gut microbiome? A lot. Firmicutes and testosterone. Firmicutes is a beneficial bacteria. It's a probiotic. What the heck does that have to do with testosterone levels? Quite a lot, turns out. The estrogen, we talked about that, right? This is the area of the gut that helps to detoxify and regulate estrogen. The gut microbiome estrogen connection, menopause and the gut microbiome. Okay. All right. So 6 fundamentals of hormone balance. Now notice when I go through all 6 of these, what do they all have in common? Your gut. Everything is linked to your gut. Okay. So we've got digestion, blood sugar, inflammation, liver health, such a biggie, nutrition, stress and sleep. All right, digestion. So we've talked about this extensively already. That beta-glucuronidase aspect and marker, which is a really great one for us to test for, right? When I was talking about earlier that symptoms can be very challenging to track, we want something that we can sink our teeth into, right? That's like a black and white number of like, wow, look at that. That beta-glucuronidase number is way higher than it should be. We can address that. Again, that's the one that we can usually get down pretty quickly and can have a big effect on people's hormones. I always like to remind people of this because they don't know this, Did you know that what you eat actually turns you into who you are? Isn't that wild? You actually are what you eat. And even more so, you are what you absorb. Okay, so it's one thing to eat like a delicious, nutrient dense diet. Okay, but if your digestive system is not actually absorbing what you're eating, it's not going to have that big of an impact on you and it's not going to help you that much. Okay, so fat, cholesterol, protein, carbohydrates are all essential for the production of hormones. In other words, your body can't make fresh hormones if it doesn't have those things. And I always really like to point out that cholesterol piece because cholesterol has gotten such a bad name, but when you look at how hormones are made, the actual chain reaction, cholesterol is at the top, baby. Okay, some more research for you that's so fantastic. So I have a number of different papers here cited for myself. But each one of these points of research, they're all pointing to how gut bacteria can inhibit estrogen metabolism and overall hormone balance. It can stimulate hormone production, which is not necessarily a good thing if we are producing more hormones than we need, okay, which was the case with this gentleman that I was working with who was making too much estrogen. These inflammatory gut microbiota can influence and mimic, right? They can act similarly to hormones, which completely confuses the hormone balance that happens between your brain and your sex organs. Okay. And then lastly, interestingly enough, those gut microbiomes can, or excuse me, those gut species can also, those inflammatory species can also compete with those hormones. Okay. When a hormone is utilized, it connects with the receptor site. And what the research is telling us is that some of these inflammatory species are actually preventing that connection from happening. Inflammation. So I want to just kind of pair inflammation, liver health, and detoxification all together. So as I mentioned earlier, what I frequently see with men who are struggling with hormonal imbalances is that they're also coming in with high cholesterol. They're also coming in pre-diabetic. And oh, by the way, I see this so frequently with women who are in menopause, perimenopausal, and women who have really severe hormonal imbalances who are still like in their fertile season. Okay, so again, for example, PCOS is one of the hallmarks of PCOS is inflammation. Okay, so when we go back and look at my own story and my history, why is it that I was able to restore my cycle after just 1 month of starting a gut healing program? Okay. Inflammation is the piece that I point to more than anything else. Okay. So chronic inflammation can show up in a number of different ways. Food sensitivities is a huge driver of chronic inflammation. Food that's not really food, like vegetable oils. Okay, a lot of fried food that you get at a restaurant is cooked in vegetable oils and it's highly inflammatory. Leaky gut and gut infections, right? Highly inflammatory. When we've got leaky gut, what happens is the undigested food travels into the bloodstream and it pisses off the immune system. Poor sleep. You got to be sleeping, okay? But sometimes it's a vicious cycle. The hormones are so imbalanced that you can't get a good night's rest, right? So we have to intervene there. Chronic stress, huge factor, right? I think everybody can say to some extent that they have stressful things going on in their lives. Some people are way more stressed than others, but the big question is, how do we deal with that? What tools have we put in place in our lives in order to help us deal with stress? Is it meditation? Is it talking to your best friend? Is it talking to your therapist? Is it reading a novel, right? And then compromised detoxification, which leads us right into liver function. So the liver is like the filter of the body. It's essentially the organ that is responsible for helping all the trash that your body is trying to get rid of, helps that trash to move into your colon and then move on out. Okay, so one of the things that the liver does, and I have lost count here, y'all, to be honest. I want to say that the most recent research says that the liver has over 750 different functions in the body at this point. They used to think it was 500, which is a lot, but I think it's now at 750, if I'm not mistaken. I did not look that up before we started this workshop tonight, but let's just agree that it's a heck of a lot, okay? One of the things that the liver does is that it transforms toxins from a fat-soluble toxin into a water-soluble toxin. Who cares? What does it matter? Water is how it's then excreted through sweat, urine, poop. So that processing that the liver does is so important. And the liver needs tools in order to work effectively. And this is where diet is huge. Most people are not eating enough protein. It's really, really important for liver function. But also there are a lot of incredibly effective supplements out there that can support liver detoxification just at a remarkable level. And I'll say that this is one of the aspects of hormone protocols that I see is almost always missing from women's protocols. Okay, especially women who are on bioidenticals and they're still having struggles. Supporting the liver is really, really huge. Okay, so inflammation relies on that detoxification. Okay, they're kind of married, right? So we need water. That's really important for detoxification. We need protein. Again, that's really helpful for the liver. We need vitamins and minerals to help fund the actions of the liver. Okay? We need to be sweating. You need to be pooping. You need to be peeing. If you are like peeing, just a couple of times a day and it's like dark yellow, my friend, you got to drink some more water. If you're not pooping every day, that is a serious problem that we need to resolve. Okay? Your body needs to be able to get rid of the hormones it's already used. A lot of times what we see is that hormones get recirculated into the body because the liver and the digestive system are not able to get rid of them at a fast enough rate, and it causes a lot of issues. Blood sugar. So I have done numerous presentations on blood sugar alone because, my gosh, it is a very complicated topic. But here's what I just really want to stand out to you, okay? Again, I have a number of different studies to reference here. So low estrogen levels, which is very common for women in perimenopause and menopause, directly related with insulin resistance. Insulin resistance oftentimes causes insomnia, weight gain, mood issues, sometimes headaches, energy fluctuations. Okay. In men, what we know is that as their estrogen levels go up, as they start to gain more and more weight around their middle, they as well become much more likely to develop different issues with blood sugar, whether that be prediabetes, insulin resistance, hypoglycemia, hyperglycemia, where their insulin is too high. Okay, a lot of different issues there. Or excuse me, their blood sugar is too high. Why this is uniquely and so directly connected to hormones is that hormones are in part produced by the adrenal glands. And one of the big jobs that the adrenals have is to balance blood sugar. So as hormones become dysregulated, the adrenals have to work even harder. Okay? And this can then, when we've got blood sugar issues going on, this ends up distracting, if you will, the adrenals from producing hormones. Okay, so one of the most important things that I do in my practice when we do shift from when we've settled up all of our gut health issues and we transition and move on to looking at hormones, we always look at what's going on with their adrenals in combination with supporting sex hormones. Because those adrenal glands, if they're having a hard time, is going to be very difficult to establish balance in, say, estrogen and testosterone. Nutrition. So you've already heard me talk about this a lot tonight, but I want to give you some specifics here. So 100 grams of protein a day, really, really important. Okay, this is going to help to balance out your blood sugar. That is number one piece of advice that I give to my clients who are struggling with any kind of hormonal imbalances. You got to eat your protein. And we're not talking about tofu. No, no, no. Okay. I want you eating some animal protein. Okay. Try not to get all of your protein out of a package if possible. Like cook it on the stove. That's what we're looking for. Okay. Quality fats, olive oil, ghee, coconut oil, avocado oil, nuts. Those are all really good options. French fries fried in who knows what, corn oil or soybean oil or whatever kind of trans fat that they use at a restaurant is completely counterproductive. Hydration. Most people don't drink enough water. And if they are, they oftentimes are not eating enough of the vitamins and minerals that they need to utilize that water. So be sure you're eating lots of vegetables. Bare minimum, 6 cups of veggies a day, my friends. Sometimes I have a hard time doing that too, but you know what? If you put some spinach in your smoothie, protein smoothie, have a nice salad for lunch and dinner, have some roasted veggies alongside, you can get there. It's actually easier than it sounds. Couple of interesting points. Magnesium, really important for the production of progesterone. Zinc, really important for the production of testosterone. Again, if your gut is not functioning properly, you're not, even if you're eating this beautiful diet, okay, which I see this all the time. People come to me and they actually have a really, really good diet, but their gut function just needs so much help. Once we get their gut functioning properly, they can actually utilize the nutrients in their food. Stress and sleep. I want you all to just put this right to the very, very top. And I would say that sometimes this is the hardest thing for people to get on board with, but you got to start sleeping more. Okay? I can't tell you how many people I see who sleep 5 or 6 hours a night. No, it's not going to work. Okay, sleep is the time when your body puts itself back together and repairs itself. And not just your body, but your mind, your spirit. Okay? But again, as we talked about earlier, it can become a very vicious cycle. Women who are perimenopausal or in menopause, it's kind of classic for them to be waking up around 3, 4 a.m. and they just cannot go back to sleep. This is a prime time for us to be looking at gut health, nailing down your macronutrients. So what I mean by that is, again, are you eating enough protein during the day? Because if you're not, your blood sugar may be crashing in the middle of the night and it's actually waking you up. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this and actually seen it because I use a continuous glucose monitor with my clients in my practice, and it tracks their blood sugar every single day. So we can actually watch their blood sugar nosedive at about 2:30 a.m. And then we see that they woke up at about 3 because their body is trying to get enough blood sugar, or is trying to get enough sugar stores into their system. What are some of the other factors, right, for sleep? So the hormones are key. Eating a balanced diet is key. And living a lifestyle that does not chronically elevate your cortisol levels is really important. And arguably the most difficult thing that I will ask myself or any of my clients to do. So what am I talking about? It's chronic stress, right? anything that you do on a regular basis that stresses your body. This could be chronic dieting. I see this almost in every single one of my clients. They're just desperately trying to lose weight. They don't know how, and they end up just cutting their calories more and more and more, and it just does not work. And your body will hang on to weight when you do that. Okay. Chronic stress response. So many of us, myself included, we get stuck in this like sympathetic nervous system state. So what the heck does that mean? It's like you're just like constantly in this like, oh, I've got to do that. I've got to do this next thing, right? It's this fight or flight state. And I find that each of us has to establish a routine for our lives in which we consciously disengage from that fight or flight state. Okay? Again, is that meditation for you? Is that watching a movie? Great. If that's your thing, do it. If it helps you to relax, all the better. A walk, exercise is always, always, always going to be the number one most valuable way for you to shift your nervous system state. So one of the, again, aspects of hormone balance that's so important are the adrenal glands. Okay? The adrenals, in addition to managing blood sugar and making hormones, they also manage stress hormones. So again, so important to get out of that fight or flight state. Here are some of the situations in which I always like to bring adrenal testing in, okay, especially once we've gotten the first level of work done with the gut. Poor sleep and insomnia, chronic fatigue and energy crashes, startling awake at night, POTS diagnosis, it's POTS. That's when I really like to get a look at those adrenals. Blood pressure issues are kind of too high, too low. And then like chronically getting sick or chronic pain. In men, this can look a little bit different. So this can look like erectile dysfunction. Strangely enough, again, a lot of times men don't correlate erectile dysfunction with stress levels or with how their adrenal glands are doing. There's a direct correlation there. Being tired, we talked about that a lot tonight. Weight gain, loss of libido, again, those blood sugar issues. If you're pre-diabetic or diabetic, blood pressure, huge factor there for the adrenals. In women, this can show in issues with their cycle. Okay, either their cycle is too short or it's too long. They have really severe PMS, or they've got really, really low hormones. I see that a lot in my practice with women who are like in their 30s. Their hormone levels are like perimenopausal range, which at 30 should not be happening. Okay? As women get older and get into perimenopause and menopause, working with the adrenals is even more important because they become responsible for producing the majority of the hormones that a woman still has to work with when she goes into menopause. So all of these elements that the adrenals manage become ever more important, right? So we've got to get a handle on blood sugar. And part of how we do that is streamlining digestion. If you're eating a really blood sugar balanced diet, but you have a terrible time digesting protein, say you are not producing enough pancreatic enzymes, right? It doesn't matter how much protein you're eating, it's not actually going to help you balance your blood sugar to the extent that we need it to. Okay? So brain fog, memory loss, so common for people who are struggling with hormonal imbalances. And again, what I will say is that frequently with these brain-related issues, we need to just get you enough food in the first place, particularly protein. Make sure that you are digesting and absorbing it well and utilizing it well. And then help your body to deal with toxins, which means empowering your liver to be able to get rid of things that could be disrupting the functionality of the brain. And that is a a whole other topic that we will talk about, I'm sure, in one of these workshops, the relationship between the gut and the blood-brain barrier. Okay. So let's recap. I think I've talked about everything that I want to talk about tonight. Let me make sure. Oh, few tips for sleeping better. Okay, now, if you have really low progesterone levels, you might be waking up in the middle of the night no matter what you do. Okay, so this is where getting your hormones tested is really important. However, sleep hygiene, you may have heard of this phrase. It's really important. So, gosh darn, that iPhone is so tempting, is it not? Just put it away. Get yourself a good novel and see how that works for you. Okay. Meditation, really helpful at night. Exercise during the day. Wear yourself out so that you're ready to go to bed at night. Your diet. Make sure that you're eating enough so that you're not going to bed hungry and you're not waking up in the middle of the night hungry. Relaxing activities that you can do before bed. A nice bath. Again, if you are a movie person and it helps you to relax, a nice show before bed, as long as you can turn it off and it's not too addicting, is a valuable tool. Caffeine, alcohol, those can all be major factors. Alcohol can be a pretty considerable one, especially for women who are perimenopausal or menopausal. In that postmenopause as well. I haven't been saying that tonight. Please understand, whenever I say menopause, I'm also talking about postmenopause. Alcohol can be a major trigger for waking up in the middle of the night. I know, doesn't that stink? I like to have my drink here and there too. Sunlight exposure. Oh my gosh, can we please talk about how important seeing the sun is to get that vitamin D as naturally as possible? So huge. So if you can combine your exercise with going outside, it'll make a huge difference in the way that you feel and your energy overall. Okay, so we talked about so much tonight. If you are on my newsletter, you'll have access to a lot of the research that I mentioned this evening. Bottom line, if you are not addressing the fundamentals of your gut health and your diet, it's going to be very, very difficult to balance your hormones in a really effective way that actually gets you relief from the symptoms that you're struggling with. I hope that tonight's presentation was helpful for you. Please take some of this information and actually put it to use for you. Just choose one thing tonight. What could you choose? Just one thing from tonight that you're going to try out this week. Is it eating more protein? Is it putting your phone down at 8 p.m. so that you can get a better night's rest? Is it meditating for 5 minutes? Is it drinking more water? There are a lot of things that you can start doing today that can help. All right. Take care, you all. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Thanks for joining me for the IshbelWELL live workshop series. If you have questions about this workshop or you have an idea for an upcoming workshop, please get in touch with the IshbelWELL team. You can email us at info@ishbelwell.com. That's info, I-N-F-O, at IshbelWELL, IshbelWELL.com. We would be absolutely thrilled to hear from you. And if you are not yet on the IshbelWELL newsletter, hop on in there and you will get the recording every single time one of these workshops is completed.